Bienvenidos a esta presentación de los mandatos negativos familiares. This presentation will show how to form negative familiar commands as well as how to use them with pronouns. To review quickly, by familiar we are speaking in the to form to somebody, or we are speaking informally to somebody. This is usually somebody your own age or somebody that you are very acquainted with. A command can be an affirmative command, such as kick the dog, or a negative command, such as don't be nice. While neither of these are good advice, kicking the dog is an affirmative command because I'm telling you to do something, and don't be nice is a negative because I'm telling you not to do something. So the way we form the negative familiar commands is a little bit more tricky than affirmative familiar commands. It isn't simply getting the ella usted form, but there's 4 steps involved. The first step is to get the yo form in the present tense of each verb. By each verb I mean AR, ER, and IR verbs. The second step is to take off the O ending of each verb. Now be careful because a lot of students think that we simply took the AR off of hablar and the ER off of comer, but as you can see with salir, which is an irregular verb, we didn't simply take the IR off of salir. It's very important to get the yo form present tense first and then take off the O. The third step is to add the opposite to form. So for AR verbs, you add an ES, and for ER and IR verbs, you add an AS. And finally, in order to make the command negative, to tell someone don't do something, don't forget to add the word no before the command. While there are more steps involved with forming negative familiar commands, there are less irregulars than the affirmatives. These are the 5 irregulars for negative familiar commands. These simply need to be memorized, but they do all have something in common. What they have in common is that the yo form does not end in an O. So there's no way to drop the O and follow the steps to form the negative familiar commands. For example, ir, the yo form is boy, estar is estoy, and since those don't end in O, again, we can't follow the steps. Another set of irregulars are verbs that end in car, gar, and zar. If you've studied the preterite tense, this should sound familiar. Since we're adding the opposite to form to these AR verbs, the ending ES changes the sound of the C, changes the sound of the G, and we have a problem when we have the combination of a ZE. To solve this issue, tocar and any verb that ends in CAR needs to end in QUES. No toques preserves the hard C sound of the C in the infinitive, tocar. Verbs that end in gar need to end in a GUES. No juegues preserves the sound of the G in the infinitive. Verbs that end in zar, ZAR that is, need to end in CES. So where do we place pronouns with negative familiar commands? It's a little easier than with the affirmative familiar commands. With the affirmatives, we placed it at the end and had to worry about an accent mark, potentially. Don't buy them, with the them referring to the flowers, a feminine plural noun. No compres is our command, And when we add the word las, the direct object pronoun for flores, you see here that we add it in between the no and the command for no las compres. Don't tell me, no me digas. Don't do it, no la hagas. Don't buy them, no los compres. And finally, don't wash yourself, a reflexive verb, and since these are familiar commands, we're going to use the pronoun te, no te laves. Practiquemos. The negative command of tener is no tengas. Vivir, no vivas. Ser and ir are irregulars. They don't end in an O in the yo form. No seas, no vayas. No pongas. No escribas. No salgas. And again with reflexive verbs, since these are familiar commands, we're using the pronoun te. No te bañes. No te levantes. Gracias por ver esta presentación y te deseo mucho éxito.